Next one we're talking about is the number 2 team in college football, Georgia against Florida in Jacksonville in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. My storyline to going into this game, Dalton, is can Florida prove that it's moving in the right direction as a program? There was a lot of pessimism around the Florida Gators entering the year. They endured 3 straight losing seasons entering this year. That's the first time that's occurred for Florida since the 1940s. Head coach Billy Napier entered the year on one of the hottest seats in America, and he needed to prove his legitimacy against one of the most, maybe the most brutal schedule in college football. So far, it's been okay for the Florida Gators, honestly. They're currently 4-3. They're coming off a close overtime loss to number 7 Tennessee, a dominant 28-point win over Kentucky in their last 2 games. DJ Lagway has shown a lot of encouraging signs for the future. He was the highest-rated quarterback coming out of high school last year, and he currently leads all true freshmen with a 78.5 passing grade. But now's the time for Billy Napier in Florida to further show that they can hang with the big boys in the SEC. Their next 4 games are against number 2 Georgia, a road trip to number 6 Texas. They host number 16 LSU, and they host number 19 Ole Miss. Their next 4 games are against top 20 opponents, with the hardest one being this one against number 2 Georgia. Winning one of those games is pretty much a priority, I would say, for Florida, because you win one of those 4 games, you beat Florida State at the end of the year, you make a bowl game. Billy Napier might be able to keep his job if they make a bowl game, but if he doesn't win one of those 4 games, at 5-7, they probably will move on from them. Listen, this is probably the least winnable out of all those 4 games, but even if they don't beat Georgia, even if they look competitive against a national championship contender, national championship favorite, that'll go a long way for those boosters and the fan base to say, okay, you know what? We can hang with the big boys in the SEC. So really, this is a big game for Florida, even if they don't win it, to just prove that you belong on the field with Georgia.
Yeah, it's gonna be big, because I think there were too many games last year and even against Miami in week 1 this year where it just wasn't even competitive, like you mentioned. So I think the ideal scenario for Napier in this program is they're gonna be okay, and they're gonna build around Lagway, and they'll find talent around him to work with, right? So it is a big game and a big stretch for them to see just compete through the rest of the season, right? Obviously they're not going to win the conference or go to the playoff or anything like that, but keep competing against these good teams and see who you have that you can carry into next year.
Absolutely. So, Don, you have the Georgia offense in this one. So what should we be looking out for when the Bulldogs and Carson Beck have the ball?
So this Florida secondary, even though on paper it looks like they've been slightly better lately, this Florida secondary still keeps me up at night. They're 78th in the country in coverage grade, and if I take out one game where they dominated Samford, who's an FCS team, that drops down to 115th. This has been the biggest problem for me, maybe even more so than the offense, is just Florida making mistakes in the secondary and giving up big plays. And they're facing their biggest test this week in Carson Beck since they played Cam Ward in week 1, because they played a lot of teams that are really shaky in the passing game, right? You talk about Kentucky, you talk about, I think, Mississippi State. They played
Tennessee.
They played UCF. Tennessee, even though they were number 7 in the country, Tennessee has a hard time throwing the ball. They haven't played a really tight passing game since that Miami game. So now you talk about, okay, now for me, more even just as much as Lagway against Kirby Smart in the defense, which is hard enough, now you've got a Florida secondary where I go, okay, is there any improvement here 7-8 weeks later from what we saw them getting torn up in that Miami game? And the one big obstacle that you have with this Georgia team, even though they haven't consistently dropped back and just thrown the football all that well, Carson Beck is still really dangerous in play action. If Georgia gets the running game going, Trevor Etienne revenge game maybe.
Good call,
might be a thing. But, if they get the run game going, they get into play action, Carson Beck has still been fantastic when he gets to just run this system and get into play action. 89.1 play action passing grade is the 9th best in the country still, 9.3 yards per attempt, 77.8% adjusted completion rate. So if you let Georgia get two-dimensional in their offense and you let Carson Beck get into the play action and your linebackers step up and your safety step up and he starts seeing those lanes down the field, you're going to have a problem still. And Florida against play action has just a 58.7 coverage grade. So this to me is going to be the test of, okay, I've actually had even bigger issues when I watched the Gators the last year and a half with their defense than their offense. Can your defense just keep you in this game and not give up these explosive plays and have these mental mistakes that they've been making against better passing teams the last year and a half? If they can do that in this game, maybe they can keep themselves in it.
Absolutely. My other side, my matchup to watch on is about the quarterback as well. It's the kid, DJ Lagway, against the best defensive mind in college football, and Kirby Smart, who, by the way, Kirby Smart has had 2 weeks of preparation for this game. That should be a little scary if you're a Florida fan with how good Kirby Smart is as a defensive mind. But listen, starting off with Lagway, it's hard not to be excited about this kid if you're a Florida fan or even a college football fan in general, because this kid, number 3 overall recruit in the 2024 class, he took over for the injured Graham Mertz and has looked really admirable as a starting quarterback for Florida. 9 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. I mentioned before, like a 78 passing grade as well. This kid has ridiculous arm talent with the ability to deliver to any part of the field with ease, honestly. I mean, he was throwing like frozen ropes 40 yards down the field. I was watching his tape last night, Dawn. That has really just unlocked pages of the playbook that were not accessible with Graham Mertz as the quarterback. Now, you could throw the ball downfield, and guys like Elijah Badger and Shamir DK have really benefited from that, right? It's no longer a conservative offense. You could push the ball downfield now if you're Florida and not having a conservative quarterback like Graham Mertz. But now you go against Kirby Smart. He's had 2 weeks to prepare for him, and Georgia loves to just kind of confuse quarterbacks, right? They're 6th among Power 4 schools in blitz rate at 48%. They're 6th among Power 4 schools in stunt rate at 39.5%. They try to speed quarterbacks up and confuse them. And you saw Quinn Ewers a couple weeks ago was in a blender against that Georgia defense. He committed 7 turnover-worthy plays. That is tied for the most by a Power 5 quarterback over the last 5 years of college football. Lagway, I will say, though, has done really well against the blitz. He currently is 8th among FBS quarterbacks with an 86.6 passing grade when blitzed. He's also very impressive against stunts, 80.3 passing grade against stunts. That's 24th in the country. If he's going to do the impossible and vanquish Kirby Smart, he'll likely need to follow the blueprint that Jalen Moreau had a few weeks ago now. Jalen Moreau and DJ Lagway, if you look at them, they're very similar, right? They both have big arms. They both can run a little bit too, and both of them want to go to the deep ball. They want to uncork their bazooka right arms and to show it off. But Moreau in that game was forced to be a lot more conservative against Georgia, and then when it was available, like the Ryan Williams touchdown at the very end, then you take the shot. But you don't take shots every play. Lagway, you look at his tape, you could tell this kid wants to just show off his arm every chance he gets. So if he wants a chance at performing well against this defense, like Jalen Moreau did, patience is key. You got to be patient in this game for him. And strike when the opportunity is there rather than throwing it deep downfield every play and playing right into Kirby Smart's hands. So I think following the Jalen Moreau blueprint should be the key for Lagway in this game, because if he's just trying to uncork the deep ball every single play, that's when you get issues, and Kirby Smart's going to make him pay for it.
Yeah, I think Georgia, what Kirby Smart does so well in his defense is the perfect balance of aggression. You mentioned the blitzing, and yet still preventing explosive plays, right? It's the combination of those two things that any defensive coordinator wants, and Kirby always gets out of his defenses. So I don't think you're right. I think it's that Lagway, he can't force. He just can't force balls into Georgia's secondary because you already know at that point Malachi Starks is coming. Like that's just gonna happen. You have to wait. You have to wait for those moments and wait for those opportunities. Obviously, it always helps to run the ball, but that's kind of the beauty of Georgia's defense is they get to balance those two things, and they are the masters at it. And like you mentioned, Kirby, so good. You know, we saw it against Texas too. Texas didn't have anything vertically down the field. No. Nothing. He was going to make Quinn Ewers work underneath, or he was going to get pressure to him. So I think Lagway really has to pick his spots for those deep balls, and he's got to not make big mistakes. Because there's sometimes under pressure where he can just kind of fling the ball somewhere and some bad things happen. So I do think it's going to be a fun challenge for Lagway going up against Kirby.
Absolutely. So, Dolan, in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, who wins between these arch rivals?
I just have a hard time seeing Lagway and at such a young age beating Kirby Smart in that defense. In Florida, I still question their defense. I've got Georgia 34-20. I still think they take care of business. I just think as long as they don't give up some sort of big play that puts them behind early in the game, I think they'll have enough to get this done.
Yeah, I got Georgia even winning by a bigger margin than you. I have it 37-17. Listen, Lagway, this kid is supremely talented. He has a bright future. Trevor Sikkema, Florida grad, was telling me he's the most talented quarterback they brought in since Tim Tebow. Honestly, we all know how good Tim Tebow was. As good as he is and as talented as he is, he's not quite ready for this game just yet. I don't think so, at least. We'll see. Maybe he proves me wrong. But with Kirby Smart coming off a bye week, having 2 weeks to prepare for this kid, I think he'll take advantage of his inexperience and force him into some bad turnovers and bad plays in this game. And then on the other side of the ball, I think Carson Beck will shine against Florida's secondary. So I have Georgia winning this one 37-17.